I caught her hand on my doorknob. That smug, pastel-wearing menace from the HOA, her name was Cheryl Oakley, stood on my porch like she owned the place. Clipboard in one hand, the other frozen mid-turn of my front door handle. No knock, no call. Just a bold, entitled twist like she thought my home was her office. "You can't just walk into my house, Cheryl," I said, stepping out from behind the oak door. I'd been home on my lunch break, just trying to reheat some leftovers when my motion camera pinged. Cheryl blinked at me like I was the one who was trespassing. "As president of the HOA, I have the right to inspect any property in the neighborhood," she said, her lips pursed so tight I thought her face might implode. "That's not a thing," I said. "Not in this state. Not in this country." Her short blonde bob bounced as she scoffed. "Well, maybe if you didn't have that unauthorized shed in your backyard, I wouldn't have to take matters into my own hands." There it was. The shed. A simple, tasteful, pre-approved by the city structure I'd built 3 months ago for my tools and gear. I'm a contractor. I need my tools. The city signed off. But Cheryl and her band of clipboard warriors decided it clashed with the neighborhood aesthetic and claimed it was non-compliant. I sent them the permit. Twice, they fined me anyway, twice. "You're trespassing," I said. "Step off my porch." She didn't move. "If you have nothing to hide, then what's the issue?" I pointed at the Ring camera above the door. "The issue is you're about 5 seconds from starring in a felony B&E case." Cheryl's eyes twitched. She took one step back, heels clicking against the concrete. "We'll see what the HOA attorney has to say about this." "Good. Maybe while he's at it, he can explain the Fourth Amendment to you." She marched off, high heels stabbing at the pavement like she was punishing it. I watched until she turned the corner, then walked back inside and pulled up the footage. There she was, Cheryl Oakley, queen of the HOA, hand on my doorknob, trying to enter without consent, and all of it in glorious HD. I downloaded the footage and saved it in 3 places. I wasn't about to let her gaslight me like she had the Thompsons down the street. Cheryl had forced them to repaint their house 3 times in 1 month just because she didn't like the shade of beige they'd picked. But this wasn't paint. This was breaking and entering. And I wasn't going to let her get away with it. My name's Jackson Fielder. I've lived in this neighborhood for 6 years, paid every due, followed every rule that made sense. But I don't roll over for anyone, especially not power-tripping middle-aged women with imaginary authority. I had a plan. And it started with a quiet trip to the sheriff's office. The sheriff's deputy raised an eyebrow when I showed him the clip. "You said she's part of the HOA?" he asked, rewinding the footage to the moment Cheryl gripped the doorknob and leaned into it. Her shoulder gave a faint push, testing if it was unlocked. I'd watched it a dozen times by then. It wasn't subtle. "President, technically," I said, setting the flash drive on the desk between us. "But even royalty doesn't get to force their way into someone's home." He pushed his glasses up his nose and nodded slowly. "Yeah, this isn't just a trespass. That's attempted unlawful entry. You said she didn't knock. No knock. No call. Just showed up, tried the handle, then threatened me with legal action when I told her to leave." He leaned back in his chair, pulled a report form from the drawer and clicked his pen. "All right, Mr. Fielder, let's get this on record. We'll start with your statement, then I'll log the evidence. If she actually enters next time, that's burglary. But this still crosses the line." By the time I left the station, the report was filed and a copy of the footage had been logged into evidence. I wasn't looking for revenge, I just wanted a record, something official. Cheryl had a talent for rewriting reality to suit her narrative, and I wasn't about to let her twist this one. I didn't tell anyone in the neighborhood what happened. Not yet. I wanted to see what she'd do next. It didn't take long. 2 days later, I came home from a job in the city to find a bright yellow notice duct taped across my front door. Not slipped gently into the mailbox. Not posted with painter's tape. No, this was industrial-strength adhesive slapped across the wood like a quarantine warning. Unapproved structure violation, final notice underneath, in small type. It claimed I'd failed to respond to multiple warnings and would be subject to immediate enforcement action, including lien placement and property inspection. There was no signature, no date, no mention of the city. Just the HOA's tacky letterhead and a bunch of vague threats. Across the street, I spotted Cheryl standing in her yard holding a pair of pruning shears, pretending to trim her already immaculate hedges. Her eyes flicked to me, then back to the bush. Calculated, deliberate. I walked inside, peeled the adhesive off, and dropped it onto the kitchen counter. Then I went to the cabinet above the fridge and pulled out the folder where I kept all my permits and correspondence. I already had the city's approval. I already had the emails I'd sent Cheryl and her board with proof. But now she was escalating, threatening to file a lien. That wasn't just petty, that was financial sabotage, so I made 2 calls. The first was to my buddy Marcus, who'd spent a decade working in the city's zoning office before switching to real estate law. The second was to someone I hadn't spoken to in years, my sister Elise, assistant district attorney for the county. "Tell me you've got something I can use," I said as soon as Elise picked up. "Depends," she said. "What's the charge?" "HOA president tried to enter my house without permission. I got her on camera, filed a report already. Now she's threatening to file an illegal lien." There was a pause on the other end. Then, "You recorded the attempt, clear as day." And the lien threat, she put that in writing, stamped it on my door like a foreclosure notice. Another pause, "Send me everything." If she's misusing her authority and trying to manipulate property records, especially with false claims, that moves into criminal territory. Could be fraud, maybe coercion, depends how far she takes it. I hung up and got to work scanning the documents, the notice, the permits, the emails. Everything went into a shared folder. By the end of the night, Elise had it all. 3 days later, she called me back. "Jack," she said, "you're going to want to sit down." I was already on the couch, half a beer in hand. "I ran a records check on your HOA," she continued. "Specifically Cheryl Oakley. Turns out she's filed 6 liens in the past 2 years, all of them personally signed. No attorney involvement, no court filings, just internal HOA forms, then she submits them to the county recorder's office as if they're legitimate." My stomach tightened. "Is that even legal?" "It is if the HOA has the authority and follows the process, but these don't match anything on file with the city. And the properties she targeted, 3 of them ended up selling under market value after the liens scared off buyers." I sat up straight. "Are you saying she's manipulating title records to tank home values?" "Bingo. And if she's doing it knowingly, that's fraud. Possibly racketeering, depending on how many board members are involved. I've already looped in our white-collar division." I stared at the wall, trying to process it. Cheryl wasn't just power tripping, she was running a whole scheme. That night I walked the neighborhood. I didn't go door to door, I didn't make a scene, I just talked. Quiet questions with people I trusted. A few subtle mentions of lien threats, fake violations, and whether anyone else had weird encounters with Cheryl. The stories poured out. Maria on Pineview had her patio furniture deemed non-compliant and was fined $500. She paid it, scared they'd put a lien on her place. Gerald and Nina had their backyard swing set flagged as an unauthorized structure. They'd taken it down, even though it was there when they bought the house. One guy, Doug, said Cheryl had threatened to report him to Child Protective Services because his lawn was unsafe for children. His daughter was 5 by the time I got home. I had a list of 11 incidents. Some were small, others were terrifying. But all of them followed the same pattern: vague accusations, sudden fines, and threats of legal action. I emailed the list to Elise. The next morning she responded, "We're opening a formal investigation. Do not confront her directly. We'll be in touch." But Cheryl didn't wait. Less than 48 hours later, I came home to find a printed letter stuffed in my mailbox. No envelope. No HOA letterhead this time. Just a single sheet of paper typed in bold. "You are creating a hostile environment. Your actions constitute harassment. Cease immediately or face civil litigation." I didn't even bother responding. Instead, I sent it to Elise. That Friday, 2 unmarked sedans pulled up in front of Cheryl's house. A pair of plainclothes detectives stepped out, followed by a county records officer. They were there for over an hour. One of them carried out a desktop computer wrapped in a plastic evidence bag. The following Monday, Cheryl was gone, not just from the HOA gone. Her house emptied out overnight. For sale sign up by dawn. No goodbye, no announcement. Just silence. At the next HOA meeting, the board sat stiff and quiet while a new temporary president, a retired judge named Paul, took the floor. He opened the meeting with a single sentence: "We are cooperating fully with the county's investigation." No one asked what he meant. We all knew. By the end of the month, the liens Cheryl had filed were being reviewed one by one. Homeowners who'd been pressured into paying bogus fines were issued apology letters. A few even got partial refunds, and my shed, still standing, still legal. But now there's a new sign on my door, not from a printer, not from the HOA, just a small brass plaque I installed myself. It reads, "Private property surveillance in use entry without consent will be prosecuted." And this time I have the law on my side. The following Thursday I got a call from Elise just after sunrise. Her voice was clipped, focused. "Jack, you're going to get a visit today. County investigators. Don't answer questions from anyone else. Don't hand over anything unless they show you a badge." I was standing barefoot in the kitchen, coffee halfway brewed. I tightened my grip on the phone. "What happened?" "She didn't just bend the rules," Elise said. "She rewrote them." "It's bigger than we thought." I didn't ask for more. I knew she couldn't say it over the phone, so I waited. By noon, 2 plainclothes investigators from the county's Special Investigations Division stood on my porch. Real badges, real business. Detective Barrow was tall and lean, with a weathered face and the kind of voice that didn't ask questions twice. His partner, Singh, had a black leather case she kept unopened until we sat down at my kitchen table. "We've confirmed several instances of fraudulent lien filings," Singh said, laying out documents one by one. "But there's more. We've uncovered internal HOA communications, emails, text messages, and meeting notes. Your former HOA president wasn't acting alone." Barrow nodded. "We're looking at organized misconduct, possibly conspiracy to defraud. We're coordinating with the state attorney general." I leaned forward. "Who else is involved?" Singh pulled out a list. 3 board members. They co-signed enforcement actions, approved fake legal notices, and in at least one case, fabricated a maintenance violation to justify foreclosure proceedings. Barrow tapped one of the files. That last one, the homeowner was a disabled vet. Cheryl fast-tracked the foreclosure, citing unpaid fees that never existed. Once the house was seized, it was sold to a shell company registered under her cousin's name. I felt my jaw tighten. "That's theft." "It is," Singh said. "And we're treating it as such." They asked me to walk them through everything from the moment Cheryl tried to enter my home. I showed them the footage, the notices, the emails. They took digital copies and asked if I'd be willing to testify if it came to that. "Absolutely," I said. Before they left, Singh turned back at the doorway. "She made a mistake pressing you. You documented everything. Most people don't." After they left, I sat alone at the table for a while, staring at the spot where Singh had placed the list of co-conspirators. 3 names I knew. People I'd waved to for years. One of them even helped organize the summer block party last year. By sunset, the neighborhood was buzzing again, not with gossip, something quieter. A shift. Cars idled longer in driveways. Shades stayed drawn, no one lingered on porches. Word was getting out. The next morning, I stepped outside and found a manila envelope wedged into my mailbox. No stamp. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a typed message: "Stop talking to the county." Accidents happen. Attached with a paperclip was a blurry photo of me unloading lumber from my truck in the driveway, taken at night from across the street. I didn't hesitate. I walked it straight into the sheriff's substation. 3 hours later, a cruiser parked near my driveway. A deputy now patrols the neighborhood twice daily. Not obvious, not loud, just present. Elise called again that evening. They've been watching people, she said. Not just you, they had a surveillance spreadsheet, names, habits, routines. Anyone who spoke up got targeted. My stomach sank. How did they get away with this for so long? Silence, she said. Fear, and until now no one had hard proof. That weekend I hosted a backyard gathering, nothing fancy, just a few neighbors I trusted, no agenda, no speeches, just cold drinks, burgers, and quiet conversations. We kept our voices low, not because we were scared, but because we were building something. Gabe from 3 houses down used to work for the county assessor. He offered to help people review their property records. Lena, who'd been fined for a non-existent irrigation leak, brought a folder of receipts and letters. She'd kept everything. We started connecting the dots. Over the next 2 weeks, a volunteer group formed. We called ourselves the Review Committee, nothing official, no titles. Just residents comparing notes, every fake citation, every fine, every threat. We built a timeline complete with reference numbers and scanned documents. Then came the big one. Milo, a quiet guy who lived at the end of the cul-de-sac, had something none of us expected: audio recordings. His home security system had picked up Cheryl and one of the board members standing near his side gate, unaware the mic had picked them up through the fence. Their conversation: how much longer do we have to keep this up? Until the sale goes through. Once we flip it, she gets her cut and we settle the rest. I thought you said the guy was moving out. He will. One more violation notice and he's done. He's already behind. Hope he doesn't get a lawyer. He won't. People like him don't. Milo had never played it for anyone before. He thought it was just idle gossip until our group started comparing notes. We sent it to Elise. She looped in the state investigator. Within a week, subpoenas were issued. The arrests began quietly. Cheryl was picked up in a grocery store parking lot, still wearing a tennis visor and pushing a cart full of organic snacks. The others followed, 2 pulled from their homes, one from a bank where she worked part-time. The charges were serious: conspiracy to commit fraud, unlawful property seizure, falsifying public documents, and in Cheryl's case, attempted unlawful entry. Court proceedings began 2 months later. The opening statements were brutal, and the evidence our group had gathered was front and center. I testified on the 3rd day, calm, direct. I told the jury what I saw, what Cheryl did, and how she tried to flip it on me. The footage spoke for itself. So did the forged notices and county forms. The prosecution brought in experts, people who explained how false liens can destroy lives, how fabricated violations can be used to manipulate property value, and how HOAs, when unchecked, can become private tyrannies. Cheryl's defense tried to paint her as overzealous, misguided, even well-meaning, but the jury didn't buy it. The verdict came back in less than 4 hours, guilty on all counts. She was sentenced to 6 years. The others received lesser sentences, but all included restitution and bans from serving on any housing board again. Back in the neighborhood, the HOA was dissolved by a unanimous vote. In its place, we built something new: a council of homeowners, each serving for a single term, with all meetings open and streamed online. No fines without third-party verification. No citations without photographic evidence and city-backed documentation. We installed a community bulletin board near the entrance where notices are handwritten, signed, and posted in full view. No more secret meetings. No more threats. And my house, still standing, still mine. Now, when I see new families moving in, I make a point to walk over and shake their hands. I tell them to read everything they sign, to speak up if something feels wrong, and to never, ever assume that someone with a title has power over their home. The law is clear. Rights don't end at the curb. And if someone ever tries to twist that truth again, this neighborhood will be ready. The trial had ended, the guilty were sentenced, and the HOA that once ruled our neighborhood like some petty dictatorship had been buried. But not everything was settled. Not yet. Exactly 17 days after Cheryl's sentencing, an unexpected letter arrived. Not from the county, not from the courts, but from a private law firm in Easton. The header was embossed gold, the kind of thing meant to intimidate. It was addressed to me and marked time sensitive. I read it twice. Then a third time. According to the letter, Cheryl was attempting to appeal part of her conviction specifically, the charge related to unlawful entry. Her new attorney claimed the evidence was misinterpreted and that the video of her trying my doorknob lacked intent to enter. They were arguing that she was merely checking for damage to community property. I stood there at my kitchen counter, the letter trembling slightly in my hand, equal parts fury and disbelief running through me. The nerve! I called Elise, who was already looped in by the district attorney's office. "She's gambling," Elise said, "trying to peel one charge off the record so she can get a reduced sentence. But it's weak. The footage is clear, and your testimony was consistent. Who's paying for this?" I asked. Elise paused. "There's reason to believe her legal fees are being covered by money funneled through a fake maintenance fund the HOA created 3 years ago. It was disguised as a landscaping reserve. We're working on proving it." So Cheryl had one last card to play, and she was funding it with stolen neighborhood money. I wasn't angry anymore. I was exhausted. But I wasn't backing down. The appeal hearing was set for a month later in a higher district court. I was called back to testify, this time with new evidence Elise's team had uncovered. A hidden bank account used by the HOA filled with diverted member dues. Some of the payments were traced directly to Cheryl's personal expenses, vacation rentals, boutique home decor, and yes, legal retainers. I arrived at the courthouse early that morning, suit pressed, folder in hand. The waiting room was colder than I remembered. The bench was harder. There were no cameras this time, no jury. Just a panel of 3 appellate judges and a room full of sharp eyes. Cheryl sat across from me, flanked by her new attorney, a man who looked like he hadn't blinked since 1996. She didn't look the same. Her hair was longer, pulled back tight, no makeup, gray prison uniform. But her posture still radiated entitlement, like she expected the world to apologize for not keeping up. Her attorney began with a confident opening, trying to spin the footage as ambiguous. He claimed Cheryl had been acting on a reasonable belief that she had the right to inspect homes in the community, that her role within the HOA granted her limited authority to verify compliance, that there was no evidence of intent to enter unlawfully. Then Elise stood. She walked the court through the timeline calmly, methodically, like a surgeon explaining an incision. Cheryl Oakley was not inspecting damage. She made no effort to knock. She did not call. She had no warrant, no permission, and no legal grounds to enter. She attempted to turn the doorknob, applied pressure to the door, and only backed away when the resident confronted her. That is not ambiguous. That is attempted unlawful entry. Then she introduced the bank records. The judges reviewed the documents silently, their expressions unreadable. When they asked if I had anything to add, I stood. "I didn't want this," I said. "I didn't ask for it." But when someone walks up to your door and tries to break in, then calls it inspection, that's not community leadership. That's a predator with a clipboard, and when they use the money we all paid in good faith to fund their defense, that's not just theft, that's betrayal. The judges thanked me. Cheryl said nothing. 2 weeks later, the ruling came in, appeal denied. The panel concluded that the evidence was overwhelming and credible and that the original conviction would stand. She would serve the full sentence. No parole eligibility for at least 4 years, but it didn't end there. The financial records Elise's team had uncovered triggered a secondary investigation, this time by the state's Financial Crimes Unit. They found that Cheryl had siphoned over $38,000 from the HOA's accounts into various personal channels, including a fabricated landscaping contract with a shell company registered to her nephew. The state filed new charges: wire fraud, embezzlement, and falsification of financial records, Her sentence was extended by another 5 years. Meanwhile, the neighborhood was healing. Without the HOA's chokehold, people started opening up again. Front yards grew a little more colorful. Kids played basketball in driveways without getting warning letters. Neighbors who had been strangers now met at the community garden we built in the empty lot where the old HOA office used to be. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Gerald and Nina got their swing set back up. Maria painted her patio furniture bright teal. Milo, the guy with the security audio, started a community newsletter with actual transparency meeting notes, vote tallies, and budget updates posted every week online and in print. As for me, I kept the shed, never touched it, never painted it. Just let it stand as it always had, legal, solid, and no one's business but mine. One afternoon, as I was packing my tools into the back, a new neighbor walked up. Young guy, probably mid-20s, moved in 2 houses down. "Hey," he said. "I heard you're the guy who took on the HOA." I wiped my hands and nodded once. He looked around the street, then back at me. "So, like, how'd you pull it off?" I thought about that for a second. Then I pointed to the little brass plate still bolted beside my front door. The one that read, "Private property, surveillance in use, entry without consent will be prosecuted." "I didn't pull it off," I said. "She just picked the wrong door," he laughed. But it wasn't nervous, it was easy, clean, the kind you hear when people believe in their street again. We shook hands and went back to our yards, and just like that, life moved forward. No more yellow notices, no more threats, just a neighborhood that remembered who it belonged to, us.